Who is in control of the Straits of Hormuz? Yes, both the Iranians and the Trump administration and the Americans are claiming that they respectively are in control of the Straits of Hormuz. So who's actually in control of it? And where are we right now in this whole Iran thing? The original memorandum of understanding has now expired in terms of the amount of time it was supposed to last, right? It was supposed to be for 2 months, for 60 days, and that means that it's over. And we're going to see how Iran is behaving about that. Now, everything Iran is doing fits in perfectly with what I've been suggesting they would do since before the war even started. So those of you who've been watching this channel, nothing that has happened should be very surprising, but we're going to take stock of where we are and assess how Iran is positioning itself for the next stage of things. And we're going to do that. We're going to start off with a short clip from our favorite American general, General Jack Keane. So let's bring General Keane up onto the stage. Here we go.
Iran claiming it has complete control over the strait. Really? This comes as Iran's foreign minister issues a warning saying, quote, the U.S. has long miscalculated due to intelligence failures. Case in point, the war in Iran. Now an even bigger miscalculation on the Strait of Hormuz. The tough talk comes after President Trump said the U.S. has, quote, total control of the waterway and thinks we will keep it. Retired four-star General Jack Keane is here to react. He's also a senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute of Study of War. General, who's right?
Well, both of them have something to say about this, in my judgment, okay? So let's unpack it a little bit so our audience can understand. Obviously, we have a naval blockade in, and nothing going to an Iranian port or coming out of an Iranian port is able to take place. We've turned around 55 ships, we've disabled 3, and we boarded 2. So that is control. There's no doubt about that in terms of that specific trafficking, and that's sizable in of itself. The second thing the United States is doing, we have successfully demined more than one route in the Straits of Hormuz, and obviously that has long-term implications itself. And then we're transiting ships along the southern route off the coast of Oman, and CENTCOM is doing that. Transponders are normally off, that's, revealing their location, usually done at night, and we're also protecting them in that transit. And those transits are safely done and completed. And obviously those numbers have gradually increased into the double-digit number of ships. So that's the reality there in terms of what the United States is controlling. So what does the Iranians actually control? What they are doing, it's less about control, and it's more about influencing shipbuilders. Through intimidation and coercion, there's still a significant number of ship owners and ship captains, obviously, who are in the region, who do not want to transit the straits because of the threats from Iran. And that threat is real, and it's in their heads, certainly. Now, they know they can pass through the southern route. We've demonstrated it doing safely, but in their minds, there's still too much risk. So that it's less about control that Iran is claiming. It's more about influence and the threat of disrupting the Straits of Hormuz.
So they say.
Okay, let's unpack that before we move on. So what did he say there? Who's in control of the Strait of Hormuz? His answer was actually, well, it depends what you mean by control. From the standpoint of control, yes, there is the southern route, the route that stays close to the Omani coast, that the Americans are securing, and our ships passing through there. And they've done a significant amount of demining, right? So it's safe to say the Americans are in control of the Straits of Hormuz. The Americans are also trying to ensure, to assure various ship companies, ship owners, and countries that it is safe, and trying to transit more ships through, and they are escorting ships through, etc. On the other hand, the Iranians are still disrupting things and threatening and firing on ships periodically, and leading these ship owners to be a little skittish and a little, not so sure of it, and therefore it discourages them from from transiting the Strait of Hormuz, and that gives the Iranians some measure of control, that they get to decide who they fire on and who they antagonize, and they are disrupting the shipping in the Straits of Hormuz. So they both claim that they control it. It depends what you mean by control, meaning the American quote unquote control is not preventing the Iranians from disrupting things to the point that that shipments are discouraged, which functionally means to some extent the straits are closed. On the other hand, the Iranians don't really control it, and the Americans have more operational control over it. Okay, so that's on the Strait of Hormuz point, and we'll come back to the Strait of Hormuz point in a bit. We'll see what the Iranians are saying about it in their media. But let's continue with General Jack Keane, and what he then gets asked a follow-up question. Here we go.
I think is kind of the difference.
The Secretary of Energy came out yesterday and told Brett Baer, you were on the show 2 days ago, he was on yesterday, they have an average of 8 to 9 million barrels of oil per day are currently moving through the strait. That's what prompted the Iranians to answer that. We prefer 20 million barrels, but they say we're moving it through. And that was, we have said we are moving it through without a lot of fanfare. So it shows that there's something happening there. General, right now in this holding pattern, the Iranians feel they have the advantage. The president feels he has the advantage. Who do you think has the advantage?
Great question.
Well, a couple things. Well, I do think the United States does for a fact. But the truth is, what the Iranians did in taking charge of the straits in terms of disrupting it and influencing it on March the 2nd, right after we began the war on February 28th, had impact. Obviously, we went to a ceasefire on April the 7th. For what reason? To negotiate with the Iranians over opening the Straits of Hormuz. They initiated that talk. Why? Because they wanted the war to stop. And has the war restarted in any consequential way? No. So did they achieve their goal in doing that? Yes. And we moved into a diplomatic phase, and we're still in it 4 months later. And that.
Before we get on with the rest of this clip, that is just such a succinct way of putting it, and it just really sums up where we are. Look, and he's being polite about it. He doesn't want to say that President Trump messed up. What he's saying is, look, right early on in the war, what did they do? They closed the Strait of Hormuz, and then we entered into a ceasefire to negotiate the opening of the Strait of Hormuz, and we're still in that phase. Nothing's changed. The Americans are being strung along by the Iranians trying to get the Strait of Hormuz open now from early April, May, June, July, August. We're over 4+ months since the ceasefire. So did the Iranians accomplish their goal? Yes. They also got much closer to the midterms. They got exactly what they wanted. So who's winning? From that measure, looks like Iran has got everything going for them.
It's the reality. The president's frustrated by that phase. Because, he's learned the Iranians lie, they cheat, you can't deal with them, they're crazy. These are the president's conclusions about that diplomatic phase. And we're applying increased economic pressure, what Secretary Besson is doing in epic economic fury is really significant. And, the details of that, I think they'll reveal more of it. And that, when you add it on to the blockade, right, is quite dramatic. But no one knows if that's going to force the Iranians to take a knee here or not. I don't even think the Iranians know. I think what...
Bingo. He says, look, who's winning? Who's in a stronger position? That was the question that Brian asked him, right? So his first answer was, listen, the Iranians, so far, the Iranians played a certain card when they seized the Strait of Hormuz and then offered to enter negotiations to open them. And they wanted to stop the war. Did they accomplish their goal? Yes. On the other hand, with all of the blockade and everything the Americans are doing economically, it's weakening Iran. So from that perspective, maybe America is winning. On the other hand, the whole reasoning behind all of the economic stuff is there's a logic behind it that we still on this channel, and General Keane very politely continued to question. Meaning the entire logic behind the Trump tactics here, the strategic logic is that if you put enough economic pressure on them, they will at some point, they have a breaking point. And that's not clear that breaking point is achievable. Certainly not in the, it's not clear that it is. Had we imagined what it would be, we would have thought they would have passed it a long time ago. There seems to be no indication that they're reaching the breaking point. More on that soon.
What the Iranians want to do is resist all of that. They don't care about the suffering of their people. They believe time is on their side, and they'll ride this thing out as best they can. I believe that is their intention number one. Their intention number two, as we get closer to the midterms, is likely to increase violent and aggressive activity, believing that the administration will not react to it in any consequential way because it'll drive up oil prices prior to the election.
I believe we've already seen that because they've been firing on ships the last few days. I've reported on it. You've seen it reported. A couple UAE ships, some other ships. And the old threat from a couple of weeks ago that Trump said that for every ship they fire on, he's going to take on one of their bridges or something else. We haven't seen that. We haven't seen airstrikes back. So that means that now they're firing on ships and they're not getting hammered by the Americans. I think we're already getting close. We're already getting to the point where Trump doesn't want to do kinetic action. I think he's putting all his eggs in the basket of the economic warfare, and he's not even so concerned about bombing them anymore and making them pay for attacking ships. Interesting.
Would be a fundamental miscalculation on their part once again, because the president has lots of tools in his hands here, and he can retaliate and likely would very aggressively retaliate regardless of the midterm elections. That is the lever, obviously, we have. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, that's the end of that. Let's take this down, and I'll drop these. Yeah, someone asked in the comments why I sometimes wear headphones. So when I'm playing a video, if I'm wearing headphones, then the sound comes through clearer in the system. Anyway, yeah. So let's see what Iran is doing. I believe what I want to show you now in the headlines I'm going to share with you from Iranian state media and from the messaging the Iranians are putting out, that I believe the escalation has already begun. Not necessarily kinetic escalation, but it's not only kinetic escalation that will hurt Trump. Remember, Jack Keane's logic is absolutely spot on, and it's what we're expecting to see. That as we get closer to the midterms, the Iranians are going to they're going to want to ramp things up. They're going to want to escalate. And the goal is to destroy Trump's chances in the midterms, meaning to position Trump as a failure. And with escalation, there's a spike in oil prices, but it's not only about the price of gas. It's about the whole war looking like a failure, that no progress has been made, that it is dragging on, that Trump's strategy isn't working. This is the entire playbook. And by the way, it's working as he laid out. We stopped this war more than 4 months ago to open the Straits of Hormuz, and we're still in that diplomatic phase. Hard to argue that the Trump administration approach has been successful. And again, if the goal is opening the Strait of Hormuz. Now, they could be still winning. I'm not saying they're not winning. Americans are still winning. The economic pressure could still bring about the collapse of the regime. I believe that is correct. Maybe, hopefully, there's got to be a point where the economics get so bad. Okay, so don't jump all over me for saying that Trump's failing. The point being that this is the strategy the Iranians are running, and so far their strategy looks to be working. So take a look. This is from today. Iran Army Chief, Strait of Hormuz is key to ending the war. Iran's Army Commander, Major General Amir Hatami, described the Strait of Hormuz as a strategic geopolitical asset for Iran, saying that the waterway will not return to its previous status following recent developments and that Iran will defend it with all its capabilities. Let's jump further down. The Army Commander said the expulsion of U.S. forces from the region had already taken place, and that the United States would no longer be allowed to enter the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Oman, or the Strait of Hormuz. He also said that Iran would not allow U.S. military bases and facilities in neighboring countries to return to their previous status. Iran strengthens its defensive capabilities. The Army Commander said, this is the report of statements that he made, and I'm going to tie it all together. Let me just read through the few things he said, and then I'll tell you where I think this messaging is headed. The Army Commander said that Iran is rapidly rebuilding its offensive and defensive capabilities, adding that the country has preserved its defensive capacity while also adding new capabilities. talks about the restructuring of their armed forces. Hatami also described the U.S. president as a major loser. They put that in quotes, and they put it as the title of a section here, saying he's making considerable efforts to portray himself as a winner while fewer people around the world are taking him seriously. He said the image being projected of the U.S. president is that of someone who, according to reports, hid inside a food truck out of fear while leaving other government officials and journalists behind on an aircraft that the U.S. Secret Service had warned could be under threat. Hatami said such scenes were evidence in this view of the image of a major loser, like they're trying to paint Trump as a coward rather than a victorious leader. Hatami also referred to Trump's remarks about the Strait of Hormuz, saying that the activation of the Strait's strategic potential was one of the legacies of the U.S. president's actions in the region. He says that sarcastically, that Trump, he walked into a trap, basically, or he unlocked the strategic potential of Hormuz by triggering the Iranians to close the strait, and that ended up being, his legacy. And look at this, and we're going to look at this as a separate. Here, let's look at this as a separate news item. They mentioned this $30,000 reward for killing Americans. We'll get to that in a moment. Iranian military vows no compromise until complete defeat of U.S. and Israeli forces. This is from today. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran vowed on Sunday that it will not back down from its demands until the complete defeat of American and Israeli forces in the region is achieved and the rights of the Iranian nation are secured. Now, why is that? That's not so newsworthy, but I'm putting this together to show you that when Jack Keane says that Iran's strategy is to escalate ahead of the midterms, it's not only kinetic escalation. It's also rhetorical escalation. Escalation, because if the goal is to paint this war as a failure for Trump, that no progress has been made towards his strategic goals, you can signal that no progress was made towards those strategic goals, not only by kinetic action, but by statements. In other words, they want to give ammunition to those who say that the war is failing, which includes the Democrats and other people who want to paint Trump as having failed at this. There's a lot of people out there who do. They're giving them, so they're trying to give ammunition to those who want to say that Trump failed by saying, look, the Iranians aren't backing down at all. They're rebuilding their defenses. That's why they included that, right? That they're rebuilding their defensive capabilities. And that they're rebuilding the defensive capabilities, that Trump's policies all backfired. He's a loser, right? He's a coward. They're already campaigning against Trump here. That's what this is about. Meaning it's an escalation in rhetoric, while not necessarily an escalation kinetically. That's my point. And we saw this already. This is from a few days ago. It's from the end of last week. And I was thinking of making a whole video out of it, but it actually fits right here. Iran moves beyond Islamabad memorandum as cost of any new deal rises for Washington. So the MOU that was signed in mid-June is actually over. It was supposed to be a 60-day agreement. 60 days is ending. So look at what Iran puts out. Iran's latest official position, announced by the Supreme National Security Council, signals a broader strategic decision in Tehran to move beyond the framework of the MOU. The new position significantly raises Iran's demands and sets a higher threshold for any potential agreement. Under the newly stated framework, Iran has laid out the following conditions for reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Quote, the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed until the United States accepts Iran's conditions, including an end to the wars in Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran, as well as the release of Iran's frozen funds. It also involves an American withdrawal from the region and other items that are in their list of, I think they gave like 6 demands. But now this is their own commentary. This is Iranian state media giving its commentary on Iran's new position. This new position represents a strategic shift from the logic of the Islamabad memorandum for several reasons. So they want to show now in this piece how the shift that Iran is making with its new demands are actually ratcheting up their demands beyond what they were demanding in the MOU. That's the whole point, that they're escalating their demands. Number one, moving beyond the Strait closure in exchange for lifting of U.S. naval blockade formula. Under the Islamabad Memorandum, the MOU, Iran was expected to facilitate the safe passage of ships in return for the lifting of the U.S. naval blockade. Iran's latest position, however, no longer treats the lifting of the blockade as a temporary concession. Instead, it calls for a complete end to the war and release of all frozen Iranian assets. So they're explaining why it's an escalation. Next escalation, explicitly adding Gaza to the equation. While Article 1 of the MOU referred to the cessation of military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon, meaning it mentioned all fronts with Iran, but then it singled out Lebanon. Remember, we talked about that a lot. That was Article 1 of the MOU, was all about Lebanon. It made no explicit reference to Gaza. The new Iranian position, however, specifically identifies an end to the war in Gaza as an additional condition. So it's another escalation of demand. The change signals Iran's intention to alter the existing equation and increase the cost of any new agreement for Washington. The firm shift in position, announced on the first working day of the new Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, and reportedly likely to have come under a direct directive from Iran's highest levels of authority, carries a clear message. Following the other side's breach of its commitments, Iran will not return to the previous terms. Instead, it intends to use its stronger position on the ground to raise its demands for any new understanding. What's its stronger position on the ground? It sees that it is attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The United States is basically not doing anything, so they're digging in. They see themselves as having a stronger position on the ground. Raising these conditions represents a step forward, advancing Iran's interests. However, the real significance will depend on whether Iran's diplomatic apparatus can also adapt to this newer and more assertive approach, avoid repeating past shortcomings, and firmly establish these conditions as the basis for any future negotiations and ultimately secure a concrete outcome. So this is very interesting. It's sort of pointing to the diplomatic team, saying they need to embrace this tougher stance, this escalated stance. And then we see this escalation, which is from today. Iranian army chief announces $30,000 bounty for capturing or killing invading U.S. troops. Major General Amir Hatami, Commander-in-Chief of the Islamic Republic of Iran Army, announced on Sunday that a $30,000 public-backed reward will be awarded to any Iranian force that captures or kills an invading U.S. service member. Speaking on Sunday, General Hatami stated that with public participation, any Iranian force that successfully captures or kills an invading U.S. military personnel will receive a $30,000 prize funded on behalf of the Iranian people. That's quite the escalation. But again, this is an escalation of rhetoric. See what they're doing. The game is so that when people look at the Iranians and say, whoa, they're not only are they not backing down, but they're digging in further, it makes Trump's war look like more of a failure. That's what they're doing now. They've already started the pre-election campaign to make Trump look like a failure, look like a coward. They're thumbing their nose at him. They're taunting him. This very much reminds me of their behavior in advance of the war itself. Like right before February 28th, when the Americans were building up all of their military assets in the region, and Trump and Witkoff was saying, I played the clip recently, played it a few times. When Witkoff was in an interview on Fox where he was saying that that President Trump was kind of frustrated that the Iranians haven't capitulated yet. Why haven't they capitulated? Why haven't they given in? They were just ramping up their rhetoric more and more. They're doing the same thing now. In fact, during that time period, you might remember this event. They put on public display a bunch of coffins with American flags on them with the names of all the leadership of the American military as like this bombastic threat that they're going to kill Americans. And now we have this ridiculous statement that they're going to give a $30,000 bounty for capturing or killing invading U.S. troops. It's not relevant. There's no ground invasion about to happen that anyone can see. They're doing this to taunt Trump, to make him look weak, to make it look like all of his strategy isn't working. That's what they're doing. Okay, so the escalation has already begun. I agree with General Keane that we might also see kinetic escalation, but this is the escalation already. That's my point here. And finally, one last piece of rhetorical escalation or messaging escalation, we could call it. MOU signed with U.S. consolidated Iran's diplomatic victory. Ghalibaf, he says here, Parliament Speaker Mohammed Bagher Ghalibaf describes the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding between Iran and the United States as a document that brought honor to the nation and consolidated the Islamic Republic's victory in the field of diplomacy. And what he explained, he has a good point, is that the MOU granted them the authority to make decisions about the Strait of Hormuz, and it also acknowledged their influence over their proxy network and their influence in Lebanon. So they view it as a diplomatic victory. But also it allowed them to manipulate the Americans for a few more months. It opened the door for this mass manipulation, this foot dragging that we're now seeing. Remember, the MOU was signed 2 months ago, and we are nowhere closer to the Straits of Hormuz situation being solved, or any of this whole Iran situation being solved. On the face of it, we're no closer to it than we were the day the MOU was signed 2 months ago. And yeah, so that's my that's the point of this video. Just pointing out that the escalation that General Keane is talking about, I believe, has already begun at the level of the messaging. And we're going to keep following this. I expect to see more and more threatening, bombastic statements from the Iranians, taunting Trump more and more and more, and maybe playing a little bit of good cop mixed in there, saying they're negotiating if they see that if things are getting out of hand. But they know how to, how to push and pull, and they've been doing this for a while. Promising a deal at the last minute. Remember, what was it, like a week or week and a half ago, Trump was about to do a massive attack, and then oh, no, now they're willing to make a deal, and he backed off. It's like Lucy pulling the football away in Charlie Brown. Anyway, that's where we are. I'll stop there. Please like, share, subscribe. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel at Israel 365 News. We're uploading a new conversation with Dr. Wormser, with David Wormser from today. So make sure you get over there and you see that. All right. Thanks for watching. God bless.